Welcome to chapter 5 of the book of 1 Timothy, written by Paul, probably after his first imprisonment in Rome. He was someplace either in Greece or Asia Minor, and he continues with his pastoral advice to his young friend Timothy, and he says, you should not rebuke a presbytero, an elder. Now, here he's talking about an elder as far as an older person in age, and they could be an elder in the church or both, but he would be older probably than Timothy, an elderly person maybe. So you shouldn't rebuke him, but appeal to him as a father. Well, instead of correcting as a son would correct the father, it just doesn't happen. Generally, it's the other way around. I remember Jacob with his sons and complaining about, what are you guys sitting around? You should be out doing something, getting the cattle going and everything. So a young person wouldn't do that, but appeal to him, please, can you do this or not do this or whatever, using a little, not common sense, but appealing to him anyway in a nice way. Any younger men, treat him as brothers, adelphos. Of course, I don't know, I've seen some brothers fight some pretty bad ways, but all these are the ideal way, not the way a lot of times it does happen. Brothers fight against brothers. There's two twin brothers, identical twins, and the one did body work on cars, and I saw him, and he was in church, and I think his brother was too, and the next time I saw him, his face was all mangled, his eye was black and blue, and I said, what happened? He said, I got to fight with my brother. I'm going, oh my God, fighting with your brother. And it was terrible. I couldn't imagine. I had a half-brother, but I only saw him when I was 2 or 3. He was killed in the Battle of the Bulge in Germany. It's 25 years difference. And then elder women as miteras, a mother, and this is patera, a father. Paternal comes from that. Elderly women as mothers. Younger women as sisters, adelphas instead of adelphos, with all purity. So to do all these things with a pure heart, not trying to do any harm. Esteem widows, really widows. Esteem them. So if they are really widows, you take care of them and look out for them. And if any widow has children or progeny, let them, the children, learn first to be pious for their own house and to repay repayment to their precursors. Of course, all this is in the ideal because a lot of times the children aren't believers and so forth. And they're older, and so you have to realize that Paul is giving him the ideal situation and how to work with it. But it doesn't always work that easily, as we know. For this is good and worthy of being received before God. The children taking care of the parent. And now in the 21st century in the United States, instead of the children doing it, it's all being put on the shoulders of the government. And the government's not going to do anything as good as the children are. So older people are going to probably be mistreated more. And it's sort of sad, but it's the way things are falling apart in the 21st century. And he continues, the one really a widow, that is, the husband died. It's not talking about a widower here. A widower, a male, would be able to pretty well take care of himself. But older elderly women is not as easy. In the 21st century now, we've had the feminist movement in the late 20th century, and women can do everything that a man can do. And a while back, I was working at a hotel, and the women were, all feminists, and there was a lot of women in that hotel, and there was 3 flights of stairs to go up. Well, the older it became, the more they called me to take the heavy things up to the 3rd floor, till finally they couldn't do it. So the feminists of women doing everything sounds good, but to me it doesn't work. Women, when they get older, they're not physically the same as an older man. I have a friend that's, she's in his 90s. He climbs up on a ladder, does all kinds of work painting his house. I've never seen a woman in her 90s do anything like that. So there is a difference, and some people may not like to hear it, but so anyway, one who really is a widow, whose husband has died, and being left alone, she doesn't have children, that is, or they're not going to take care of her, has hope in God and remains in the supplications and in the prayers night and day. Now, the early church, the Catholic Church, had nuns, and the nuns weren't married, or if they were, maybe they were widows, I'm not exactly sure, but they took care of a lot of people in hospitals and taught the grade school children and did things like that. But the one living extravagantly, the widow, while living, has died. Well, I'm not exactly sure. If they're living extravagantly, then that's not what they're supposed to do. They're to be serious for the Lord. And these things exhort that they should be unassailable. So if they aren't, if they're a widow and they're, I don't know what exactly, living extravagantly, if they got money from when their husband died or something and they're living extravagantly, I'm not sure what Paul is talking about, but exhort them that they should be unassailable. And if any thinks not beforehand, too, of his own, and especially the ones of his family, he has denied the belief. Woo. And is worse than unbelieving. That's amazing. So if a person thinks that they're a believer and everything is built around belief, and if you believe, then you're going to be delivered and so forth. And Paul's saying here, well, if you're not living the walk, then it's worse than thinking that you're than an unbeliever. You may as well be an unbeliever. And then he says, well, let not 3, a widow, 4, where's 4? Oh, here it is. Be enrolled, 5, being 6, less than 7, 60 years old, a wife of one husband. So that's a long one, following the numbers. A little bit easier if you're not doing it in the video. So basically, the widow had to be over 60 for the church to take care of her. This is what it's talking about here, being enrolled, with good works, being witness. So it wasn't a woman that's just coming out, lost her husband, she isn't in the church, she hasn't been doing anything, and all of a sudden she wants to get something for nothing, then no. If she reared children, if she was hospitable, if she washed holy ones' feet, if she assisted ones being afflicted, if she followed after every good work. So somebody like that would be in a church for a period of time, and I went to a church with thousands and thousands of people, and so you wouldn't actually know what a person, their history, anything about it. So it's different than in a small town. If you had a small church and everybody would know who's who and so forth, and you could do this a lot easier. And younger widows refuse. So if they're under 60, no, don't let them don't help them. Basically, don't refuse to help them or anything, but don't officially give them the help that an older woman would get. For whenever they grow careless towards the Christ, they want to marry. Well, I guess you're a woman and you love the Lord, but then you meet a man, you think about being married and having a man take care of you and loving you, and that's natural. Nothing wrong with that. He calls it growing careless towards the Christ. Well, that's the way Paul calls it, but having judgment because the first belief they disregarded. So if they kind of walk away from Christ, maybe not wholeheartedly, but somewhat, then they're not as the same as a widow that spends all of her time in prayer and helping and things like that. And together also idly they learn to go around the houses, the younger widows, but not only idle, but also in prating and useless work, speaking the things they must not. Well, I'm not a woman, I'm not a widow, and I don't know what women do with their idle, going around prating and useless work, speaking things they must not. So maybe if you're a woman, you're reading this, you know what Paul is talking about. Apparently he knows more about women than I do. I prefer then the neoteros, the younger ones, to marry, to bear children, to manage the home, not one opportunity to give to the adversary, excuse me, thus reviling favor. So he prefers them to marry and to be mothers, to meet a man if they had already been married. For already some were turned aside after the adversary, it could be, or actually Satan here. I put Satan, exactly turning after Satan, the adversary, is a serious thing for somebody to turn aside and go after the adversary. And I suppose if you're lost your husband and you're looking for another one, and the one you find that comes into your life somehow is not a believer, he has all other motives for life and everything and not good, then going with that person, it might be dangerous and terrible. If any believing man or a believing woman have widows, assist them and do not weigh down the assembly, that it should assist the ones really widows. So if somebody is trying to use the system, basically, then watch out, because you don't want to spend the money and the goods, everything that you're doing on somebody that's milking the system. How do you know? Well, there's ways of finding out if a person could be doing something useful and is not, is trying to get something for nothing. Today I was driving to the store and I went to the stop sign. There's a man there with a sign, something about I hit the end of the road and need help or whatever. And what was he doing? He was smoking a cigarette. Well, you say, well, no big deal. But cigarettes now are like $7, $8 a pack. So if he can afford to get a cigarette, when I see that, it's like the first thing I see is that, well, he has money. If he can afford to buy cigarettes, he doesn't have to spend that money, because if you're into a cigarette habit, spending $7 or $8 a pack at least, maybe $10 a day, that's $300 a month. And a lot of money. You could be spending it elsewhere. So there's ways of telling if somebody is milking the system. And then he says, let to the 3 elders, for being well in charge, be worthy of double honor. The elders, that have done things and have worked for the assembly, let them be worthy of double honor. Help them out. Give them more. Especially the ones tiring in the word and instruction. I don't attend a regular assembly here in Newport, Oregon. It's a small town, and I haven't found one I fit in or has invited me, and so I've been spending my time with the Word of God, and I feel like I'm sort of like Paul when he was in the Arabian Peninsula after he came to the Lord. The Lord has me in a special place, and but I spend a lot of my time in the Word and instruction, and I receive my money from the sale of the printed editions of the Bible and a few books that I have available, the English derivatives from the Greek New Testament, which I've had for 25 years, and then my analytical lexicon of the Apostolic Bible. And then from last year, I developed the entities of the book of Revelation book, and I sell these, and I receive my money to pay my rent and everything with that. I don't make a whole lot, but it's enough, and the Lord takes care of me. And then it says, for the Scripture says, you shall not muzzle an ox threshing, and the worker is worthy of his wage. Because I have run across people who don't want to go to church and give their money to the pastor because they don't think he should be given money, he should be out working. Well, a small church, that's probably the case. But a large church, if he's spending all of his time in the Word, then he should be given money or a wage. And there's nothing working because it says right here, the worker is worthy of his wage. So if he's spending all of his time with the assembly, then that's fine. Then he says, well, do not welcome, 3, a charge against an presbyteru, an elder, from outside, that is, from somebody that's not in the church. I don't think he's talking about it if they're in another church, but, well, maybe it was, but anybody on the outside of that church, unless by 2 or 3 witnesses. So if 2 or 3 witnesses came and said that they saw something, well, then you can. That's something a charge to take into consideration. Because I had a man came over and we were talking about the church that he was going to, and he heard something from somebody else, some bad things that were going on, and I said, well, did you see it? And he said, no. And I said, well, then why are you even bringing it up? If you're just repeating something from somebody else and you don't even know if they saw it or not, then that's not good, because if you're doing that, you're basically spreading false rumor. And the one sinning reprove before all, that also the rest should have fear. Well, that's easy on a small church. But the church I went to were 3,000 at one time. If you reproved everybody in there that was sinning, I mean, you would never have a church service. It would just be a reproof service. So it's easy to do when you have a small church, but not when you have a large one. And then he says, I testify before God and the Lord Jesus Christ and the chosen angels, elect angels, angelon, that these things you should guard, separate from prejudice, doing nothing by inclination. So you are to do these things without having a prejudice over somebody. If they gave a lot of money to the church, so then you give them preference, and you don't. I mean, a lot of people, that happens a lot of times. And if a person doesn't, and then it's easy to come against that person and find fault with them. Doing nothing by inclination. Think about what you are, and this is for pastors, think about what you're going to do and sit on it for a day or so. Think about it and pray about it, and not do it on a spur of the moment type of thing. 22, basically be a impartial judge. Place upon no one a hand quickly. So don't, if somebody just comes into the church, you don't know them very well, you need somebody to be in a position of leadership or something, don't just rush over to him and put your hands and give him that authority. You need to really know the person well before you give people authority. Nor participate with sins of strangers. So if you're the pastor, then basically here I look at partnerships with non-believers. That's what he's talking about. And because if you join in a partnership with a non-believer, he wants to cheat on his taxes or how much money or so forth. He wants you to go along with it. That's not good. But keep yourself pure, Paul says. And then he comes to this famous verse that so many people have quoted. No longer drink water, but use a little wine because of your stomach and your frequent sicknesses. Asthenias. Asthenia is a weakness, sickness. Vino, wine, comes from that. And here is a transliteration. Stomachon, and stomach comes from that. So use a little wine in a medicinal purpose. That's because of Timothy's frequent sicknesses. That's Paul's answer to maybe it could help his stomach. Now, I don't think he's telling him to drink a lot of wine or not to drink wine. It has nothing really to do with it. It's more of a remedy here, but it's used so many places where people that want to drink a lot of wine say, well, it's in the Bible, no longer drink water, but use a little wine for your stomach. And I'm using it for my stomach. Yeah, they're not. But that's a quote that's often used by people that have an alcohol problem. Then he says, of some men, the sins are exposed to view. You can see some people that are doing things that are obviously sinful in homosexuality or adultery, or they can be, I don't know, there's all types of sins, I suppose, that would be, the people could tell the person alcoholic and being under the influence of drugs all the time. And this leads, are exposed to view leading before to judgment. You look at them and go, wow, man, that person doesn't have Jesus in them, and they're going to be judged. We know what's happening. But some also follow after. Some people, we don't see the sins, but they're there, and they will follow after. Basically, what he's saying here, they will become apparent later. Likewise, also the good works, ergonomics, are exposed to view. So some people are doing all kinds of wonderful things, and people can see the things that they're doing, and it's good. And it's not. I don't think he's talking about here somebody trying to boast in the things. It's just obvious good works. People or wow, this person's helps people out, and people can see it, but not all. Some people, it says, and the ones otherwise having taken place are not able to be hid. So if somebody's doing a good work, that eventually it will get out, and you'll find out. I broke my leg years ago, and I couldn't work. I didn't have any money to make my payment for my house, and so I went to this friend that he's a fisherman, fairly wealthy person, but he gave me $1,000, and eventually I paid him back, but somehow I've mentioned to a few people what he did. So eventually somebody's going to find out, because somebody like me with a big mouth is going to tell somebody, and they will find out. So it's not able to be hid because of people talking, like myself. And I don't feel bad about it because it was a godly man who was doing a godly deed, and I really appreciated it. Now, in chapter 6, our next video seminar, the last chapter in this book of 1 Timothy, will go into his final telling Timothy on how to deal with these different peoples and situations. And then after 6, we'll go into the book of Titus and then 2 Timothy. I hope you'll join us in the next chapter, and God bless.